Living off my son's money, and you have the nerve to be rude? My mother-in-law, Catherine's voice echoed through the room. I don't even want to speak to you, she yelled, her words cutting sharply. After that outburst, she began ignoring me completely. Days turned into weeks, and before I knew it, I had endured 3 months of her silent treatment. To compound the situation, Catherine and my husband John did something unthinkable. The key doesn't work, I exclaimed in disbelief, realizing they had changed the locks on our home without informing me. Fed up with their behavior, I quietly sold the house and made the decision to move out. My name is Karen, a 29-year-old office worker. I've been married to John for 2 years now. We first met at a mutual friend's party where he stood out with his charming personality. John, 3 years my senior, works in sales for a traditional company. He's incredibly charismatic and effortlessly entertaining. We hit it off instantly, and soon we were dating regularly. Over time, our relationship deepened, and after 1.5 years, John proposed. I can't imagine my life without you, Karen. Will you marry me? He asked, presenting a ring during a romantic evening at a fancy restaurant with a breathtaking view. It was cliche, but I loved every moment of it. It eagerly said yes. And so we tied the knot. Our family gathered, we had our ceremony, and everything went off without a hitch. It was a perfect day, with many of our colleagues and friends joining us, making it a joyous occasion. Following our honeymoon, we began our life together under one roof. Both of us juggle work, so we split household chores to keep things balanced. John, who had experience helping his mother Catherine around the house, was adept at domestic tasks and an excellent cook. His homemade meals were a delight, and on our days off, we cherished our dates and the quality time spent together. I felt incredibly fortunate to have him as my husband. 2 years into our marriage, our love remains strong, and we lead a happy life. However, not everything is perfect. The issue lies with Catherine. From the moment we met, she displayed a cold demeanor towards me. The root of her disapproval seemed to stem from my educational background. Oh, you graduated from a less prestigious college? I find it hard to trust people who didn't excel academically, Catherine once disparaged me. While my college wasn't Ivy League, I chose it for its specialized courses that aligned with my interests. I firmly believe one's educational pedigree doesn't define their worth, especially in the real world. Catherine's remarks about my education caught me off guard and left me feeling deeply hurt. Tension hung thick in the air during our family gatherings, leaving my husband visibly uneasy. I had harbored reservations about Catherine even before we married, but my love for John outweighed my concerns. Since losing her husband a few years ago, Catherine lived alone in her in-laws' home. She frequently visited us, often finding fault with my efforts. Your cleaning skills are lacking. Sloppiness irks me. Ensure every corner is spotless, she'd critique, oblivious to the fact that John had cleaned just the day before. Not wanting to provoke further conflict, I remained silent, apologizing and weathering her criticisms. Yet Catherine's visits persisted, each one bringing new disparagements. You lack education, can't manage household tasks, and haven't even started a family. What do you even bring to this marriage? Her words stung deeply, especially when I was already feeling vulnerable. Fed up, I finally confided in John. Can't we address Catherine's treatment of me? What about her treatment? She's constantly insulting me, he replied, frustrated. Really? I never noticed. His casual response caught me off guard. My husband didn't perceive his mother's comments as derogatory. Hearing this revelation in our 2nd year of marriage left me stunned. Are you serious? I don't think Mom means to be hurtful, I faltered, questioning my own perceptions. Was I the one overreacting? No, it couldn't be me. It was becoming clear that both my husband and Catherine were out of touch. This realization deepened my growing distrust toward my husband. I had sensed hints of his complex relationship with his mother before, but it hadn't been an issue until now. His issues with his mother were becoming a real concern. Mom thinks you should cook more nutritious meals. Can we add more variety to our menu? He asked one evening. We both have demanding jobs. I can't prepare elaborate meals every day, I replied, trying to balance our responsibilities. A wife's cooking can inspire her husband to work harder and succeed. So please put more effort into cooking. I feel like you've been cutting corners, he pressed, echoing his mother's expectations. Fine. I reluctantly expanded the menu, which made dinner preparation more labor-intensive. However, what truly unsettled me was Catherine's reaction when she found out that my husband was sharing the household chores. "How dare you make John do housework? A wife should never do that. Stop it right now." Catherine's voice rang out angrily, pushing me to my limit. "Both my husband and I work full-time, so it's only fair to share the chores," I countered calmly. "You, my daughter-in-law, dare to speak against me? Unbelievable. This is why I can't tolerate people without proper education." My argument has nothing to do with education. In fact, I believe my perspective is more suited to modern times. I responded firmly. "Your views, Catherine, are outdated." My comment caused Catherine's face to flush red with anger. "That's enough. Stop mocking me. I won't stand for this." Catherine stormed off to complain to my husband. Furious, my husband called me over. "Mom is really upset. Why are you provoking her?" "I'm not the one causing trouble here. It's your mom," I tried to explain, but my husband shocked me with his response. "This is all your fault, isn't it, Karen?" "Wait, were you listening?" He shot me an irritated glance before continuing with a disapproving expression. "What's with the attitude? You've become so disrespectful, just like Mom warned. It's not right for a wife to behave this way." "Seriously, even you're saying this now." I felt deeply disappointed. I had hoped my husband held different values from Catherine, but it seemed her influence was stronger than I realized. Could I truly find happiness in this marriage? Uncertainty overwhelmed me. Then my husband dropped another bombshell. "Mom is moving in with us," he announced. "When? Is she coming again, starting tomorrow?" I asked, caught off guard. "Don't say starting tomorrow like it's temporary," he replied uneasily. "So, it's just for tomorrow?" I questioned with a sinking feeling. "No, she's moving in, starting tomorrow," he clarified. "Moving in?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Since when did this become about living together? "My mom finds it inconvenient to keep coming over, so we decided it makes sense for her to move in," he explained, oblivious to my shock. "What? Why would you make that decision without discussing it with me? I'm the one bringing in the income. This should be my call." It was increasingly clear that my husband was completely influenced by his mother, Catherine. She must have been feeding him ideas about a wife's obedience, but making the unilateral decision for Catherine to live with us was unacceptable. The following day, Catherine arrived as if it were the most natural thing, hauling large bags with her. She confidently claimed a room on the first floor, behaving as though she had always lived there. "Karen, get the coffee brewing, will you? You're such an inconsiderate daughter-in-law," she demanded. "Hey, Mom's tired from moving. Cut her some slack." Catherine and my husband immediately joined forces to scold me. The thought of this becoming a daily occurrence was unbearable. I started preparing for any unforeseen circumstances. Catherine continued to boss me around, but at the time, I was deeply engrossed in a significant work project and chose to ignore whatever Catherine or my husband said. "Why are you coming home so late? It's Karen's job to make dinner. Why are you making us wait?" Catherine demanded. "I had to work late. Looks like you both ate already. What's the issue?" I replied calmly. My husband and Catherine glared at me, their faces flushed with anger. "It's infuriating. Living off my son's money, and you dare talk back? I don't even want to speak to you." Catherine's voice boomed with accusation. I couldn't fathom where she got that idea. I wasn't financially dependent on my husband. In fact, I earned more than him. Yet Catherine seemed fixed in her misconception, and soon enough, she began to actively ignore me. No matter if I greeted her politely or asked a question, she brushed me off. To my dismay, my husband started to follow suit, joining her in this cold silence. Before I knew it, I had endured 3 months of being completely ignored. I was deeply engrossed in a demanding work project, and oddly enough, their silence provided a welcomed respite. Who knew being left alone could be so refreshing? They both wore smug smiles, thinking their silent treatment was getting to me. I saw no harm in letting them think so, even affecting a subdued and disheartened demeanor. But as my project neared its peak, the workload demanded even more of my time. Working tirelessly with my team, we finally reached the project's conclusion. In my intense focus, I had completely forgotten about Catherine and my husband. I was so absorbed that their silence, even if intended to bother me, went unnoticed. At some point, Catherine and my husband must have realized their strategy had no effect on me. That's when they resorted to something unthinkable. My key isn't working. No matter how many times I try, it won't fit the lock," I muttered to myself in frustration. It turned out they had changed the locks without informing me. As I struggled outside, attempting to get in, I overheard Catherine and my husband talking inside. "Is that a burglar?" Catherine's voice sounded alarmed. "Ha, but we're home alone, so it can't be a break-in, right?" Catherine's voice carried a mocking tone. "Maybe it's trespassing," my husband chimed in, joining her laughter. "Yeah, maybe we should call the cops," Catherine added, the amusement clear in her voice. Their laughter and casual discussion echoed through the house. I couldn't believe how far they had taken their disregard for me. It was the final straw. Quietly, I resolved to sell the house and move. This house had been my family home, left to me by my parents when they retired to the countryside last year. I have full ownership rights and had already taken precautions, having the house appraised in case I needed to sell it quickly due to Catherine's presence. I relocated to a business hotel and informed my parents of the situation, along with my decision to sell. Disappointed in my husband and Catherine, they gave me their full support. With their encouragement, I promptly contacted a real estate agent and sold the house. I arranged for a locksmith to change the locks, and as I entered the house, Catherine looked at me, visibly startled. "How did you get in? You didn't break the lock, did you?" Catherine's voice, laced with indignation, pierced the air, a sound I hoped to never hear again. Ignoring her protests, I began packing my belongings. "Say something, I'll call the police for trespassing," she threatened, her voice growing more frantic. Ignoring her threats, I proceeded with my departure, accompanied by movers who swiftly began transporting my larger items. Catherine continued shouting accusations, calling me a thief, but I remained steadfast in my silence. The locksmiths and movers seemed uneasy around Catherine, likely sensing the tension. I had informed them beforehand that Catherine was my husband's mother, suffering from a severe mental condition, and that she had mistakenly changed the locks, believing my home to be hers. The more she screamed, the more evident her condition appeared. Suppressing a smirk, I efficiently directed the move. Soon, all my belongings were gone. I left pre-filled divorce papers on the table and exited without acknowledging Catherine's tirades. As I walked away, Catherine's shouts faded into the background. Let her taste the bitterness of being ignored completely. Later that night, my husband called me, seething with anger. "What do you think you're doing, taking things from this house?" I decided to confront my husband directly. "What are you talking about? I've only taken what I purchased with my own money. Let's not forget, the house itself was passed down to me by my parents. You've been so focused on pleasing Catherine that you've started to believe your own falsehoods." It seemed my words finally struck a chord with my husband. His phone was on speaker, and I could also hear Catherine's voice interject. "Wait, what's going on?" Perfect. Since Catherine was listening, I continued firmly. "Catherine, listen carefully. I've already sold the house, so I need you to leave immediately. And please sign the divorce papers. If you refuse, I'll pursue this through the courts." Both of them fell silent, clearly taken aback by my declaration. "Are you giving me the silent treatment again? That's fine, but know that I will not hesitate to enforce this." I knew their silence was not because they were ignoring me, but because they were stunned. Nevertheless, I pressed on. As expected, my husband finally spoke up. "Wait, please," but I chose to ignore him and ended the call. Shortly after, I initiated divorce proceedings through my lawyer. My husband promptly agreed, perhaps fearing a drawn-out legal battle. As a result, both my ex-husband and Catherine were evicted. While they could have afforded a decent apartment with the money from the house sale and their pensions, Catherine's reckless spending habits had depleted their resources. She had used my father-in-law's inheritance to pay off debts, leaving my ex-husband struggling to manage the debt she had accumulated. Despite his lengthy explanations and pleas for reconciliation, I chose to ignore him completely. Now, I live alone in a comfortable apartment. I've decided to save the proceeds from the house sale for my retirement. At the moment, I'm focused on advancing my career and aiming for a promotion. Love can wait. I'm prioritizing my own future and stability. It all began one evening at our regular dinner table when my oldest son, Brad, announced he had something important to share with me. I'm Mary, 51 years old, and I work part-time. Mentally, I still feel youthful, though my body is showing signs of aging. My 3 sons, who have grown up to compensate for my diminishing energy, are my greatest pride. Brad, the eldest, has decided to tie the knot. While I knew he had a girlfriend, hearing about their engagement was still a pleasant surprise. "So, Brett's getting married, huh?" I guess that means you're getting old, honey. No beer for you tonight then, my husband joked. Ignoring his jests, I focused on Brad's expression. With our other sons away at college, Brad, now working, was the only one still living at home. His maturity had flourished in his years of employment, and now, with marriage on the horizon, he seemed more steadfast and reliable than ever. After my husband tearfully apologized to me, saying, "I'm sorry you're forever young and beautiful," I allowed him just one beer, according to my son. They were already discussing wedding venues and ring options, though the actual date was undecided. Brad wanted to bring his fiancée over to meet us first, which felt like a significant step. Marriage is a big milestone, I mused. I want them to have a wonderful ceremony. Though the stars of the day would be my son and his future wife, I couldn't help but feel a flutter of excitement. Perhaps I'd even treat myself to a new dress, reminiscing on my own bridal days as my husband continued to praise how radiant I looked in white. The weekend arrived, and Brad's fiancée, Alice, greeted us casually. "Hello, I'm Alice," she said, her demeanor reflecting the easy confidence of youth. Alice, a part-time worker at Brad's favorite cafe, had been captivated by him and pursued him until they began dating. As conversations lulled, my husband leaned in. "Ah, yes," and I nodded in agreement. "We have something important to share with you, Alice," my husband continued. "Brad isn't our biological son." Alice's eyes widened in surprise. "He's my nephew," I explained softly. "Brad's parents, my brother and his wife, tragically passed away when he was young. We adopted him and raised him as our own. He's like a son to us," my husband added warmly. "Please take good care of him." As Alice processed this revelation, a brief silence hung in the air before my husband swiftly changed the subject to lighter matters. "Well, let's leave the heavy stuff there. What kind of ceremony are you envisioning?" Alice smiled gratefully at the change in tone. "I'd love to wear a traditional white wedding dress, if possible." Glancing at Brad, who beamed in agreement, I couldn't help but share in their excitement. "That sounds wonderful. It's a once-in-a-lifetime event, so it should be perfect for the bride." At that point, Alice made a peculiar expression. For a moment, I thought she was glaring at me, but perhaps it was my imagination. Before I could dwell on it, her face returned to its usual expression. "And what about you, Brad? What kind of wedding do you want?" my husband asked, trying to involve our son in the wedding discussion. "Well, we don't really need your opinion," Alice immediately interjected. "What?" The three of us were taken aback, exchanging surprised looks. Alice seemed puzzled by our reactions, as if she couldn't understand what was wrong with her statement. "But didn't you say yourself, Auntie, that it needs to be perfect for the bride? The groom is just a bonus." "I'll have it my way," Alice asserted confidently, her smile radiant. Brad was left speechless, and I was momentarily stunned by her addressing me as Auntie. But shouldn't Brad's wishes also be considered? "Don't worry, leave everything to me, and it'll be the best wedding ever. Just make sure you work hard and contribute the funds, Brad," Alice continued with unstoppable energy and audacity, leaving us all speechless. What a remarkable girl, I thought, nodding in agreement. A few days later, both families met at a nice restaurant. This time my husband's mother was there too. She hadn't been able to join us last time because she was at an adult daycare center. Despite using a cane, she was quite energetic. "Sorry for the delay. Traffic was a nightmare," she apologized as she arrived. Alice spoke in a casual manner, even with my husband's mother, whom she had only met once before. In the background, I noticed Alice's parents shyly waving before taking their seats. The atmosphere was somewhat awkward, with little conversation as we quietly ate our meals. Just as I was about to initiate some small talk, Alice suddenly spoke up. "Granny, do you have trouble walking?" "That's right, dear. Old age has taken a toll on my legs," my mother-in-law replied. "Well, I absolutely refuse to care for you," Alice declared out of the blue, causing a moment of stunned silence. Someone went, "Huh?" It was probably my mother-in-law, but it might have been me, I said, wanting to clarify. "I have no intention of caring for any of you. Auntie, you're not my mother, so you're a stranger. And while Uncle might be related, he's not my father. I won't look after any of you," Alice asserted boldly. "Hey, Alice." Brad attempted to intervene, but she wouldn't relent. "And I definitely won't be calling you Dad or Mom, so remember that," Alice added firmly. Glancing at Alice's parents, I was surprised to see them nodding in agreement. "Well, it's true that Brad isn't our biological son, but we've raised him as one. my husband tried to interject. Hush, Uncle, Alice cut him off sharply. Okay, I'm sorry, my husband fell silent after the rebuke. At that moment, the gentle sound of a fork being placed down resonated. Is that so? Came a calm but firm statement. I glanced at my mother-in-law. She appeared composed, yet her underlying fury was palpable. They may not be their biological parents, but they've raised them with more love than many real parents would. That's not something outsiders should meddle with. My mother-in-law spoke with authority. I don't care what you say, I'm not doing any caregiving, Alice retorted defiantly. Her words infuriated me, but I held my tongue as my mother-in-law continued to speak. I'm not expecting anyone to take care of me. I know I'm old, but I don't want to burden my daughter-in-law, so I mostly use the facilities every day. Oh, really? Responded my mother-in-law. I've already transferred my assets to the couple as gifts while I'm still alive. They can use that money for the facilities or whatever they want, so you won't have to lift a finger. Well, isn't that nice? My mother-in-law replied with irritation evident in her tone. Even when her son tried to placate her, it seemed to have little effect. This discussion ends here. It's time to go home, my mother-in-law stated firmly, bringing the conversation to an abrupt close. With that single statement from my mother-in-law, the meeting came to an end. Women have become stronger these days. Perhaps that's the way of the world now. The rest of us, born in the 60s, returned home with mixed feelings. A few days later, my husband and Brad were at work, my mother-in-law was at the adult home, and I was alone at home on my day off from my part-time job when the phone rang. Oh, hey there, Auntie. Alice's voice surprised me when I picked up the phone. Auntie, can you not come to the wedding? Alice's request caught me off guard. What? I exclaimed in surprise at her unexpected request. You're not Brad's biological parent. Technically, you're his aunt. Since there's no blood relation, you're essentially a stranger. Strangers shouldn't come to weddings. But what about Brad? He wants us, his parents, to be at the ceremony, I pleaded. He doesn't matter. I'm planning the wedding my way. At the ceremony, I'll prepare a letter to his deceased parents that will surely move everyone. Alice insisted. That's not how it works. Brad's biological parents were important to him, but he considers us his real parents. That thought brought tears to her eyes before. I explained desperately. If you really want to attend, you'll have to be very generous with your gift. You received an inheritance from your mom, right? So, $10,000 is the bare minimum, if that's the case. I might let you sit in the far corner of the relative seats. How could you say such a thing? If you don't like it, fine. Don't come to the wedding. Oh, but you still have to give a gift. Wire transfer or registered mail is fine. Bye, Alice declared curtly before hanging up. The phone call felt like a whirlwind, leaving me unsettled. That night, Brad was working late due to overtime, and my husband was out for drinks. It was just my mother-in-law and me at home, contemplating the situation in silence. Looks like Alice doesn't like me, I remarked with concern. That's a problem, sighed my mother-in-law. Let's make her like us then, I suggested plainly. Simple and clear. If she dislikes us, we'll make ourselves likable, my mother-in-law agreed. And so, we stayed up late into the night, plotting various strategies. The sight of us grinning with satisfaction and saying, "Perfect, let's do this," left my husband dumbfounded when he returned home, but that's another story. The next day at lunch, when I called Alice and told her we had something for her, she came over promptly. Here to collect some cash, I joked as she arrived. Shaking my head at her assumption, I pulled out something. "What's this?" Alice asked, puzzled. "It's a cupcake I made," my mother-in-law chimed in with a smile. "I heard you don't have grandparents. Try some of this. It's a super traditional one." "I don't want it," Alice protested. "Don't be shy. Here you go," my mother-in-law insisted, pushing the treat towards her. Alice resisted, but my mother-in-law's assertiveness prevailed as she managed to get the cupcake into Alice's mouth. "Well, that's gross. Why is this so salty?" Alice exclaimed, quickly washing it down with the iced tea we had served. "Salty? That's odd. It shouldn't be," I remarked, taking a bite myself and grimacing. We had entrusted everything to my mother-in-law, including the preparation and cleanup. But who could have predicted such a basic mistake? The cupcake plan had failed, but we remained undeterred. "That's all right. Let's move on to the next one," I said with determination. "I have a gift for you." Wedding money? A gift card? Nope. Alice eyed the slightly larger paper bag I handed her, disappointment creasing her forehead as she inspected it. What's this? It's a dress. I hope you like it. It's gross. This isn't my taste at all. I would rather have money. Money? Alice bluntly stated her preference, making me reconsider giving it to her. I had carefully chosen the dress, thinking it would suit her well. Not having a daughter, I wasn't entirely familiar with current fashion trends for young women. Despite consulting with the store clerk, it seemed my efforts had fallen short. A real letdown. Another plan had failed, and instead of bringing us closer, it seemed to worsen things. That's enough. I don't want anything else. Just give me the cash, Alice demanded. A cash gift truly captures the spirit of celebration. Don't you want to celebrate your son? Of course. I do. Then I'll give it to my son. The wife should manage the husband's money. That's only natural. Just hurry up and hand it over, old woman. As Alice spoke, her true nature emerged, leaving me feeling saddened. Who are you calling an old woman? I'm still spry. Just by seeing spry, actually you're a granny, Alice continued brazenly. While I wondered how to respond, we were suddenly interrupted by a familiar voice saying, I'm home. Brad, wait, what happened at work? Alice panicked, clearly worried about being overheard. We went bankrupt, Brad replied listlessly. Bankrupt? The company's gone under. Alice's misunderstanding echoed through the room, followed by stunned silence. It wasn't just Alice who was surprised. My mother-in-law and I were both taken aback. Alice grabbed my son's shoulders and started shaking him. What does bankrupt mean? Jobless, penniless. What are we going to do about the wedding? I'm sorry, it'll have to wait, Brad replied, his voice devoid of energy. Releasing her grip from my son, Alice cried out, then how am I supposed to pay the damages? It wasn't just Alice's words that shocked us. My mother-in-law and I were stunned. My son being jobless was one thing, but I couldn't keep up with everything that was happening. Damages? Ah, never mind. Just give me the gift money quickly, Alice said, no longer caring if my son was present, holding out her hand to me. Alice, could you give us an explanation? My mother-in-law interjected. Shut up. Just give me the money, Alice snapped. It's you who needs to shut up, young lady. Explain yourself. My mother-in-law's tone suddenly turned harsh, catching Alice off guard. Under the watchful gaze of my mother-in-law and me, Alice began to speak in a weak voice. Apparently, Alice had been having an affair with her boss at her part-time job. Moreover, the man was married, and his wife found out, demanding damages. Alice had no money to pay, so she devised a plan to marry my son. She calculated that if they married, she would receive a hefty sum in gift money and planned to have my son pay for all the wedding costs while she kept the gift money for herself. My mother-in-law and I were speechless. We were angry that she had used my son, but we were also astounded by how she didn't think she had done anything wrong throughout the entire conversation. I've already settled things with my boss. Once I pay the damages, it'll be over. That's why I'm going through with the marriage. Give me the gift money. It's fortunate the truth came out before the wedding, but I didn't know what to say to her. As I pondered, I heard a low, muffled voice. Don't make decisions on your own. Looking up, I saw my son Brad glaring at Alice, his face filled with anger. Brad was usually so calm. He had never raised his voice at her before. Alice appeared startled. So what if it's over? You're not even trying to pay the damages yourself. You were planning to use our marriage for your own gain. You haven't shown any remorse. Do you really love me? Of course I love you. That's why I want to get married. Then pay the damages yourself. Show some sincerity. But, Alice tried to hold onto my son, but he coldly pushed her away. Either way, we can't get married until I find a new job. Can you wait until then? Alice was speechless. If she truly loved him, she would have been willing to wait and support him. But those words didn't come from her. That's enough, Brad finally said in frustration. I never even liked you to begin with. I thought you could bring in some money, but I don't need a jobless, penniless man. At last, Alice revealed her true feelings. Perhaps that was what she had been thinking all along. With those words, she shouted and stormed out of the house. I wondered if Brad was truly okay with this. I noticed him shaking. When I turned around, ready to comfort him, I noticed something unexpected. Laughter. My son burst out laughing suddenly. Had the shock broken him? It was a lie. Huh? A lie? The company's not bankrupt. Business is doing well. I just came back to pick up something I forgot. It turned out the bankruptcy was a ruse. My son had returned during his lunch break to retrieve something he'd left behind. Spotting us together and hearing our conversation, he grew suspicious of Alice's insistence on money and set a trap for her. I'd heard that a person's true nature shows when they face joblessness and financial trouble. I wanted to test it. The result was enlightening, to say the least. "Do you still love her?" I asked cautiously. My son looked a bit melancholy. "I loved her enough to want to marry her. But sometimes love fades in an instant. Maybe I didn't love Alice as deeply as I thought. Perhaps calling off the engagement was for the best." I exchanged a knowing glance with my mother-in-law, and we both found ourselves laughing at the situation. As for what happened next, we later learned that the cafe where Alice worked part-time had closed down. Apparently, the manager, who was Alice's affair partner, had to sell the cafe due to a messy divorce and hefty alimony payments. This information came from another regular customer at the cafe. According to Brad, Alice had no means to pay the alimony herself and had to rely on her parents. They were furious with her and ultimately kicked her out of the house. She ended up living in a rundown apartment and took up a night job. Years later, when my two younger sons had started their careers, Brad was preparing for his marriage. His partner was a kind-hearted woman. "Thank you for raising Brad into a wonderful man. I'm not much, but I'm looking forward to getting to know you both better," she told us, even knowing the truth. Moved to tears by her gratitude, both my husband and I were deeply touched. Seeing us emotional, Brad smiled broadly. "Congratulations, Brad. I'm sure your parents in heaven are also happy," I said to him. "Yes, but I'm happiest when my parents here with me are happy," Brad replied softly. His words brought tears to my eyes once more. "Oh dear, here come the tears again. You're crying too much. You've aged and gotten so tearful," my husband teased. I turned to him and declared, "Well, no beer for you tonight then."